I was in Denver last week, ostensibly for a wedding, but really just for the strippers in Red Rocks. This beautiful Latina dancer got a bunch of glitter and ass makeup all over my pants. I didn't have a laundry machine in the hotel, so I was pissed. She was overpriced to begin with, and now I had to buy new pants. Come on. The next morning, hungover and angry, I trudged downtown to the clothes store, but my mood completely changed when all of a sudden a beautiful sound emerged. It was a live electric guitar COD 4 OST remix performed by some wacko on the street. He was like, "Yeah, Call of Duty," and I got the impression he had never even played the game before. But he knew it would move product, and it did. Suddenly my problems forgotten, I'm bouncing up and down on the sidewalk, filled with some combination of pride and sweet longing. Energized for the day. I'm the guy who did Mile High. Buying new pants is gonna be a breeze. I tipped that fool $20 and I didn't even feel guilty when across the street I had nothing left for the homeless vet with no legs. Why? Because nostalgia is an incredibly powerful drug. Knowing this, it should come as no surprise that in 2019, Infinity Ward is releasing a video game under the same title as its first mega hit, Call of Duty: Modern Warfare. When asked about the redundant and gross unoriginality of that title, Infinity Ward devs compared it to James Bond, saying it's the franchise you know and love, updated for the time you live in. But this comparison has some holes, because Call of Duty is the franchise name, not Modern Warfare, so for James Bond to be this unoriginal, their last 10 movies would have had to have been James Bond GoldenEye, James Bond GoldenEye 2, James Bond GoldenEye 3, James Bond Silvereye, James Bond Blackeye, James Bond GoldenEye Remastered, and then finally, James Bond GoldenEye again. The actual list of James Bond movies is filled with qualities that Infinity Ward's product names list lacks, things like novelty, wit, and creativity. Whereas Modern Warfare has just become an exercise in spamming brand name recognition and hoping that nostalgia sells enough copies that COD can delay for at least another year its reunion with Guitar Hero and Tony Hawk in the Activision graveyard. Modern Warfare is the guy who peaked in high school, and he's still walking around with his Letterman's jacket, hoping it'll get him as much pussy as it did back then, when in reality, at this age, it has the opposite effect. Though a restart is of course Infinity Ward's best option at this point, their two attempts to try something new both failed miserably, with Ghosts and Infinite Warfare both largely considered the franchise's lowest points. Everyone thought Ghost's final cutscene was a cliffhanger, but as it's clear we'll never see a sequel, the reality is it was just a shitty ending. This is what you call karma. After the original Modern Warfare series blew up and put the franchise in the history books, Activision pushed out the studio heads and top staff in a power play to profit off of a great idea without having to pay the people behind it. Everything's been downhill since then, and like some Forza race they want to do a rewind. It's unclear if the brute force nostalgia tactics will work. After all, COD has been aggressively trafficking nostalgia for 10 years, sequels, remasters, emulations that swap out the term modern for cooler synonyms like advanced. We've seen it all and none of it really stuck, and worse, we've had to have built up some kind of tolerance to it by now. During that time, it's only seen a decline in popularity and sales. It's a mystery to me that they still think the nostalgia play is a winning move, though with how profitable nostalgia has become in cinema, where the biggest movies today are the same as the biggest movies when I was 10, I suppose I can't blame them for trying. Why not just go with Modern Warfare 4? The devs felt that, and I quote, "By the end of Modern Warfare 3, nukes had gone off, the Russians had invaded the US, and frankly, for us as storytellers, there were no relatable stakes left to craft a story around. Because everyone knows after a massive high-stakes war, it simply wouldn't make sense for another massive high-stakes war to break out, especially in a fictional universe. Obviously, the more sensible option is to revive dead characters, completely erase their pasts, and throw them into entirely new scenarios unlike anything they did the first time around, like, fighting terrorists." Wait a minute. COD's major selling point this year is its gratuitous violence. The talking points, uncritically parroted by impotent games media and bribed influencers alike, emphasize that the game is inspired by the No Russian level from MW2, that it in fact makes that level look like a Pixar movie, that it made their playtesters cry. Weird flex, bro, but I'm here for it. The missions demoed for the press include car bombings and child soldiers mutilating their enemies. There's a reason this is what they decided to show everyone. These are the qualities they wanted people talking about. These are the talking points they hit themselves in their interviews. But why? The whole point to No Russian is that you weren't supposed to enjoy it. What made it so impactful and controversial was that it was unpleasant and shocking. It won MW2 a shitload of free press, however, and ever since then they've tried to manufacture more controversial shit, hoping it might have the same effect. MW3 had its own car bombings in a sequence where you mortar innocent African villages indiscriminately, but more than anything, this just feels like that ripped pants episode of SpongeBob where he stumbles on an antic that gets a reaction and then repeats it with increasingly elaborate setups over and over and over again until nobody cares anymore and everyone's annoyed with him. Obviously, graphic violence has its place when it's done tastefully and honestly, but the way this is being marketed just feels gimmicky and creepy. It's not gross that they have it, it's gross that this is the major selling point they want to open up with. We made our playtesters cry? Really? Is that where we are at this point? A populace so desensitized by the real-life No Russian-style massacres taking place every 2 to 3 months in Vegas or Florida, and kids raping each other with broomsticks in locker rooms, so numbed on social media, porn, booze, pot, and pills that for our art to make us feel any goddamn fucking thing, we have to go to the most absurd lengths possible and then brag about it? How can we feel anything when every emotion we have is immediately cut up, imitated, and distributed for a profit? Turning our nostalgia and capacity for shock or disgust into something to be sold? This is a Black Mirror episode where everything is so fake and we feel so empty inside, we're actually excited when someone tells us they'll make us cry. Call of Duty is, as it always has been, a perfect sign of the nihilistic times we live in.